Here to talk about open source MDM, as we know, sort of state of the union, just where we've been, kind of what we're looking at. My name is Jesse Peterson. I'm a consultant and a developer with MacTex. We're just over in Belltown. Yeah, so just want to go into a little bit about what MDM is. I'm sure everyone here knows what MDM is and whatnot. How did we get here? Why are we looking at open source stuff? Where are we now? What can you do now? Working with MDM in depth, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with. How do folks get started with some of these technologies? A demo, and then just some final thoughts, kind of the overview of what I'd like to do. Yeah, so with that, how many people have an MDM system set up or have worked with MDM or anything like that? Okay, a third, yeah. So MDM, for those who don't know, is called mobile device management. It's a term that kind of Apple coined, but is now kind of a generic term for managing mobile devices, classically phones and tablets. But also, it's the term for the underlying protocol for managing iOS and macOS devices, macOS now. Classically, things like a remote wipe, remote lock, managing settings and policies, all the sorts of stuff you'd want to do for managing corporately owned or educational devices and whatnot. It usually works by a server that the iOS or macOS devices check into. So you've set up the server, and the devices check into. Once they're enrolled, they check into the server. How many people have used DEP or have deployed devices with DEP? Okay, kind of the same. Halfway. Yeah. So DEP is the device enrollment program. For those who don't know, it allows you to, from the factory, from Apple, allow you to deploy a device directly to a user and have it enroll in your MDM server, which is pretty powerful if you think about it. Typically, when you set up a device or a computer or something for a user, it has to make a trip into the IT department so that they can configure it for the user and then they can hand it off to the user. But with DEP, the hope is that we can just take that step out all the way. So that you can just directly drop ship in cases of remote users, a device directly to them, and then device essentially sets itself up. There's some holes in that. Everything's not quite perfect yet, but that's the hope. It's specifically for iOS. This allows hands-free device supervision. If you don't know what supervision is for iOS, it allows you to manage more stuff, restrictions and things like that you can't normally do. And you can do that hands-free, whereas before you have to use Apple Configurator. And again, a lot of this is review. If you've worked with MDM DEP before, some of this is obviously old news. But for OS 10 administrators who maybe haven't looked into this stuff, I just mentioned it for completion. Okay, so open source MDM. Why open source MDM? We have all these vendors providing MDM and have for a long, long time. So one reason is that there just isn't an open source solution. Curiosity, just for curiosity's sake, to go and explore what this protocol is. Another one is existing commercial solutions are kind of, you do it their way or the highway. So there's little extensibility. You can't do what you want to do. You can't deploy the tools you want to deploy. So you might say Apple's Profile Manager, that's free, right? It comes with source, right? Well, as some of you may know, Apple Profile Manager is not so ideal in many cases. And the big one, of course, is the install application MDM command plus Apple DEP allows for, hopefully, zero-touch, no-image machine deployment for OS 10, which is really cool, very exciting. If anyone saw the IBM JNUC presentation, everyone kind of, back in October, I think that was, of 2015, everyone kind of got excited about that. Okay, so how did we get here? I'm going to go kind of quick. This is just a bunch of history, and it's kind of dense, but hopefully we'll get through it. But okay, so in 2007, I'm sorry, 2008, we got configuration profiles. That was amazing because the iPhone revolutionized everyone's world, and we finally got an ability to manage them somehow. So iOS 2 brought us configuration profiles. In 2010, VVP was announced, and I just mentioned that because Apple is starting to think about mass deploying things to iOS devices. So it's not just one-on-one, but with the configuration profiles that released, you had to have a user like click on them in an email or go visit a web page or do some silliness to get your configuration profiles onto those devices. And that wasn't really cool. And then in June also of 2010, Apple announces or releases with iOS 4, MDM. Finally, the protocol is released. You can manage these things. You can send these profiles over the air to configure the devices and whatnot, which is really cool. So you don't have to have a user click on things. You can just manage those things for them. In 2011, configuration profiles in MDM arrive on OS 10. It's no longer just iOS devices, which was kind of a mixed blessing, I think, for a lot of people who had workflows already built out for setting defaults with the defaults command or what have you. And now everyone needs to move to profiles. Thanks, Apple. However, with that, you get MDM. So in August of 2011, David Schetz, if I'm saying that right, security researcher, he details the iOS MDM protocol at Black Hat US 2011, including a white paper that kind of lays bare the whole protocol for people who didn't have access to the Apple Developer Program and under all the NDAs and stuff like that. So that was quite useful to the open source developers at the time. October of 2011, install application arrives with iOS 5. So third-party apps can be remotely installed. This only started with App Store apps. That was just where it started. And I think it was OS 10.8 or 10.9 that got the ability to do third-party apps. I'm not exactly sure, but somewhere in there around this time is when OS 10 got that ability. So 2012, the same fellow releases his proof of concept MDM server code. He calls it IMDM tools. That's the first open source tools released, I think, on GitHub. So pretty cool. Project IMAS, which is separate from the Mac App Store, even though it says IMAS, is just an iOS community of developers that got together and want to improve security on iOS devices. So what they did is they forked David's code and created MDM server. February of 2014, Apple announces DEP. Yay, everyone cheers. That's very exciting. In March of 2014, a Daniel Hazelbaker posts a blog on getting enrolled with Apple, the developer enterprise account to run your own MDM server, also mentioning MDM server. 2015, what I like to call the year of open source MDM. So this is when I first start looking into this code, the protocol, the associated cryptography, etc. That was earlier in the year. In June, Yoann Gini of France, he releases OpenMDM, which is the start of an MDM server, initially focused on a web UI for editing configuration profiles. So that's where that started. Of course, Pepijn is very popular and excellent MD Amazing blog post detailing how to get started with the Project IMAS code. He posted that. That was excellent. Around this time, PSU MacAdmins was going on, so that was the first time that I heard about full DEP deployment of Macs. I'm sure it was talked about before, and maybe even some commercial products supported that, but it's the first time I heard about it, so I got very excited about that. Also at PSU, we had an open source MDM birds of a feather table going on between me, Pepijn, and Yoann, and a bunch of others. We convened to discuss the current projects, hacking around. We reverse engineered Profile Manager and a bunch of other stuff to figure out how all this stuff works. More 2015. So it begins, Pepijn uses the first OSS MDM Twitter hashtag. We start a Google group. We start amassing some attention and some excitement around the project. In July of 2015, I release my open source MDM server. I called it Commandment. So that was a lot of work and a lot of fun. October 2015, JNUC at IBM announces their Mac management. Everyone gets excited about the deployment opportunity there with the DEP no image process. That really good PR piece, which evangelizes that stuff. In November of 2015, Victor Vranchin, I hope I said that correctly, starts his MDM server code and blog posts. In November as well, Pepijn Brienne, I think I said that right, releases his blog detailing how to install OS 10 packages using MDM, using the install application MDM command. And I'll talk more about the MDM commands a little later. Shortly thereafter, I implement that support in Commandment. This year, Papine released early in the year a blog about interacting with the Apple DEP API, as well as a Python module called DEPI for interacting with it. Victor releases micro MDM, which is his open source project for an open source MDM server. That same month, I implement DEP support for Commandment. Victor does presentations, and not just that one. He's done a whole bunch of stuff at the University of Utah Mac Managers Meetup. And in late May and early June, Victor and I both start implementation on skep servers, which is pretty fun, and more stuff like this, like today's presentation, and lots of stuff. So that's kind of the history of where we're at. So where are we now? So there's two main open source MDM projects. One is mine, Commandment, and the other one is called Micro MDM by Victor. And so Commandment is mine that I've been working on, and Micro MDM is Victor's. And so Commandment has a broader focus on both iOS and OS X and typical MDM features. Micro MDM has an initial focus, at least, on OS X deployment and extensibility, middleware, APIs, stuff like that. Commandment's a little slower pace of development. Micro MDM is probably a little bit more active, but that just means it needs more people involved. So please get involved. Commandment is written in Python, Micro MDM Golang. Commandment's probably a little harder to get going because there's some non-trivial Python dependencies. Micro MDM is probably a little easier to get going, being simple OS X binaries. I should say Mac OS now. Commandment is probably a little easier to use. It has mostly a web UI for most of the tasks. Micro MDM is, quote unquote, harder to use with CLIs and command line interfaces and APIs and file configuration. But if that's your thing, that might be easier to use for you. Okay, so just a feature comparison. Both Commandment and Micro MDM have certificate authorities. We both support install application. We both support DEP. So the big building blocks of OS X, you can get that with either one. Micro MDM skep server is functional. Commandments is still in development. There's fully functional code. It's just not plugged in yet. Commandment has the web UI, whereas Micro MDM doesn't, and APIs are a little bit different there. Papine put together a fantastic, I think it was Papine, put together a fantastic spreadsheet on the details of the MDM protocol command support, so lock and lock, wipe, that sort of stuff. Go there, and you can kind of look at the comparison between the two, as well as a bunch of commercial products. So Casper Suite and Absolute Manage and MAS 360, et cetera, all those are in that nice spreadsheet. So if you want to go get started with these projects, mine's on GitHub, as well as join the Slack channel, Commandment. And for Micro MDM, it has a web page, as well as go to GitHub, check out that code, and it has also its own Slack channel. And I want to make a special mention of the Papine's fork of the MDM server code. This came from the Project IMAS stuff. That is, it's mostly a proof of concept code for research and development, feature development, testing, that sort of thing. It's probably not a good choice to base future systems on. It's not very extensible. It's a very simple application. I think it's based on WebPy. But it's really just a bare bones R&D proof of concept code. So probably not good to base your company's MDM solution on that. But notably, it was the basis for a lot of R&D, a lot of guidance, a lot of inspiration for MDM implementation. So big thanks to Papine there. I think he's on the cast. Maybe we'll have some words with him a bit later. We're going to have some words. So open source niceties. For both projects, we're breaking open source ground, which I find really exciting. We're both obviously contributing the first production open source MDM servers to the community. That's fantastic, of course. But neither Python nor Golang had skep servers. And skep servers, if you don't know, it's basically an automated way to get a certificate signed, a certificate request signed by a server with a simple HTTP. I shouldn't say simple. I take that all back. With a request to a HTTP server. And you get back a signed certificate by a CA, which is fantastic. But neither Golang nor Python had that. And on top of that, at least I was using Micro MDM skep server to improve the Python, and I think I submitted a patch back to them too. So it's got this nice open source cross-pollination going there. Okay, so how do you get started? Everyone ought to go play with this stuff because the more people that are playing with it, the better. The more feedback, the more buzz, the more all that stuff is fantastic. But first I want to talk about some requirements. And they're really unfortunate because Apple kind of has a tight-fisted approach to this. So in order to, the way, I should back up a little bit, the way MDM works is essentially you send a push notification, not unlike your normal iOS app sends a push notification, to a device, and then device checks in with your MDM server. Again, old news if you've been running MDM servers for a while. But this push cert is signed by Apple. And there's only two ways to get one of these signed certificates. You either have to be an MDM vendor, so you can be your own MDM vendor, or you can have an MDM vendor sign one for you. And the way you typically do that is you just use that vendor's product. They'll just have it built into their product to go sign one of those certificates. And you just get that for free. And then the other way, of course, is to become an MDM vendor. And the only way to become an MDM vendor is to be subscribed to Apple's enterprise developer account, which is $300 a year. So it's kind of expensive. So you might say, well, what about Profile Manager? It's free, right? Sort of. Apple is your MDM vendor in that case, and they kind of, for free, happily sign your certificate. So I don't know, has anyone seen the movie Incredibles? Probably most people. There's this fun scene in it where Bob, I think, is the main character. He works at this insurance agency, and it's full of these cubes, office cubicles. And this sad old lady comes in crying, and she and you know, about the policy, and she doesn't have much money, and what the character does is he says, you know, I'd love to help you, but I can't. Don't go to the third floor. Don't talk to this person. Don't fill out this specific form. And so in a way similar to that, I'm going to tell you to not extract the certificate from Profile Manager from your keychain. Don't use that as your open source MDM certificate because, I don't know, it probably violates some terms. So you probably shouldn't do that. Anyway, but also watch this space. There's some new interesting things that was released in WWDC. JWT, which is a specific web authentication capability, might be used for push notifications these days. And so Apple might be changing the terms, who knows, but also might have some fun announcements maybe in the time of PSU Conf. I don't know, so watch this space. DNS. So the reason why DNS is a DNS hostname is required is largely for certificate hostname matching. It's just kind of a requirement. It's officially recommended, or I think it's officially deprecated for using IP addresses and certificates. It's kind of a detail, but you really want to have a DNS hostname, so you can't just do all IP stuff. Requirements for DEP. Again, this is old news if you've done DEP. You need an established DUNS number. To register with Apple, you need two-factor enabled on your separate DEP Apple ID account, so you need a mobile phone. Hope everyone has one of those. Purchasing DEP enrolled devices. If you want to purchase them from Apple, you need a terms account. And in order to get a terms account, you need to have a large enough initial order of over 10 grand of equipment. You can order through a reseller like Zones or MacMall or CDW. And you can also order through your carrier, your phone carrier, typically through their corporate department. And I mentioned the terms account and the corporate account specifically because you can't usually enroll devices by going to the Apple retail store. In fact, I've not heard of it, nor going through a carrier's retail store like the...
They will specifically tell you if you talk to Apple.
Apple will specifically tell you, don't buy your equipment at the Apple store from a retail salesperson. Don't go to Best Buy. Don't go to your local Verizon store and buy it off the shelf. If you do buy that stuff there, you either don't dep it or you return it and buy something that can be depped.
Right. Yep. So exactly that. So don't go to a retail store to buy your dep enrolled equipment because it won't be dep enrolled and you'll just have a bunch of problems. You can enroll existing gear, but per above, it needs to be purchased on a terms account or, you know, passed through one of these resellers or through a corporate account. And the device is past March 1st, 2011. Again, that's a bunch of review, but I mentioned it just in case folks don't know. So there's some barriers to entry there. Requirements. The end user license agreement by Apple is very specific. So you cannot be an individual which really sucks. Open source development is kind of based around individuals and, you know, people doing this in their, you know, 5 to 9 time and stuff like that. But Apple's very explicit about MDM is not to be used for individuals. If I were to guess on why they're doing this, it's probably to maintain their, you know, very customer focused image, right? You don't want, you know, hobbyists tinkering around with MDM. I don't know. It's just my conjecture. But anyway, so the only way to officially enroll with Apple stuff is to be a part of an organization or business, education, etc. Okay, so getting started. This is totally a misnomer. I write these steps here, but it's not quite that easy. I really write them here to get you guys encouraged to go look at the code. So more or less, for micro MDM, you get your requirements installed, you download your binaries, you assemble your enrollment profile, you launch the server, you enroll a device. Similarly for Commandment, you get your requirements sorted, you clone the repo, you launch the Commandment server, you configure it in the web UI, and you enroll a device. That's kind of all there is to it. There's a whole bunch more, but really get involved, please help us. And for the Commandment side, I'm actually going to demo most of this. So, okay, working with MDM and DEP. So some of the not so glorious practical situations of this. This slide was shown in the MDM WDC presentation. I just included it just because it illustrates very well how the workflow of MDM. So essentially, step 1 is your MDM server in the blue here sends up to the DEP server the configuration profile, which is, I'm sorry, the DEP configuration up to the DEP servers, which is different from a configuration profile. And then when your iOS device or your Mac boots up into setup system for the first time, it connects to the DEP system to pull down that initial profile, which says how to talk to your MDM server. So step 3 is actually kind of between step 2 and 3. There is the initial enrollment of the iOS device or the Mac, and then here's some details about DEP for the await state. You can send certain configuration commands. I'll talk about that a bit more. And then at the end, the device is configured and enrolled in your MDM server from DEP. Okay, limitations for DEP deployments and install application. Install application commands only appear to be sendable while a user is logged in. This appears to be the case only in 10.11 and before. Victor was able to test, and it looks like now in Sierra, you can send commands now, and they will be queued for installation later, while a user is not logged in. So at the login window, for example, you can make them. But even though they're sendable while the user is logged in, they're mostly unattended. There is some UI there, and you can actually turn off the UI if you want by sending a different manifest. I'll go into that later. Because of this, for reliable operation, a user must create an account in Setup Assistant. So I had visions of essentially no touch by the end user, right? So turns on the computer, the user turns on the computer, and then essentially it configures itself from DEP, and then they can log in with their AD credentials or whatever it is. But unfortunately, a local user does have to be created, it seems, and this enables a certain type of DEP management. I'll actually show you what this looks like and why that's required. Yeah. So if you send too many install app commands to a device rapidly together, seems to be unreliable. I haven't done a ton of testing, but it just doesn't quite feel right. I've seen install applications get acknowledged but not actually installed, stuff like that. So the solution to that is make a single large bootstrap package. So if you shove all your stuff in there, and that seems to be more reliable than installing incremental updates, at least for the initial DEP stuff. Test your packages well. There is a bug that Victor found where if one of those packages fails, you can no longer install devices, or you can no longer install anything until I think the machine reboots. I'm not quite sure what the thing is, but basically, yeah, if one of those commands fails, you're screwed. So do it right the first time. Your packages must be signed to deploy them with DEP. So if you're not part of the Apple Developer Program, the $99 one a year, do join. You can sign your packages. Theoretically, you can sign those with the MDM server's certificate as well. I haven't tested that, so that's something to be assigned. Maybe Applepine or style packages as well. but pay attention to that. Casper's quick add, trying to push it without Cas. They were distributing their quick add as a flat package and doesn't work. Okay, so just a couple of things. So what happens if DEP doesn't gets bypassed for whatever reason? The person doesn't get the device on the internet quick enough, or something like that. Essentially, they can just bypass it. It'll just set up like a normal iOS device or a normal OS 10 device. However, if DEP is not enrolled, the user will get nagged to enroll for OS 10, and you'll get a little dialogue that looks like that in your screen. However, the user can opt out. So what's the use of that? Just another aside, guard your DEP API keys. It seems like once the DEP keys, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. Thing? Guess we got a question.
I have a question. Isn't that true for iOS only? OS 10 you can bypass, but iOS, because it requires activation, is not possible to bypass? That's my understanding. I very well could be wrong. Yeah. Because we don't want OS 10 to have to activate, but it probably will someday.
And you can do knowledge damages.
Keys. Once you decrypt the DEP keys, and I'll talk about this more at the exchange, they're just normal OAuth 1 keys. So if someone gets a hold of those, essentially they could reassign your DEP devices to go to some other MDM server. It's kind of a problem. I don't think it's a huge security risk, but I just mentioned it. If you're doing open source development, just be wary of that. MDM issues. So I've seen, and again, this is probably old news, and maybe it's just me, but I've seen the timeliness of device check-in not be as quick as I'd expect, especially with iOS devices that are asleep or at the lock screen, etc. It's on. I usually get 100% very immediate feedback from the device for push commands are a little vague. So you send something and it just sends you back failed with a negative 2,100,000,100. Yeah. What does that mean? Thanks, Apple. And I just want to mention Slack resources. So any questions about developing any of this stuff? The MacAdmin Slack is great. We've got over 5,000 users now, 5,400 actually. The MDM and DEP channels are great. I'm Jesse Peterson. Victor's Groob. Papine is Brienne. Sorry if they didn't want me to. Yeah, so reach out, join the channels, join in. All right. So now the demo of Commandment, or maybe it's a bit more like that. It is a live demo, so hopefully everything goes as expected. Make this a bit bigger here. Okay, so some of this is going to be a little bit hand-wavy because I've already sorted out a lot of the dependencies and requirements. So it's going to concentrate on, once you have all that stuff sorted, what does it look like to set some of this up? So Commandment's a Python server. So for me, that means I have a virtual environment. And let me know if that's not big enough or whatever. So I've activated my virtual environment. This has all my dependencies, M2 crypto, etc., set up. So to run Commandment, you just type Python run server. And it starts up on its default port, which is 5443. Live demo. Let's try that again. Sorry here. No. Yes, I think I know what's going on. Sorry, bear with me here. Yeah. Okay, so not sure what was going on there. It's now started. So you'll notice the certificate is self-signed when you default start commandment. And part of that is because it has its own CA, and its own CA signs its own web certificate. So if I go here, we can actually see the details of that certificate here. So it's probably a little hard to see on these screens, but my certificate is signed by mymdm.example.com, which does not match my local host name here. So that's kind of, that's not good. Those need to match. So how do we fix that? We need to go to the command, the admin UI, which tries to go to the config page, but it knows that things aren't configured yet. So you need to, there, maybe that helps a little bit. You need to configure certificates. So the first certificate is the web certificate. And remember when I mentioned DNS names, I've already set up a DNS name. So I'm going to call that mdm.local, which goes to the same place, also unsigned. But my certificate still doesn't match. It's mymdm.example.com. So what are we going to do? I'm going to generate a new one. It's going to be a web server certificate. That's the only one available. Just going to give it the country name, and that's about it. I'm going to give it the common name so that it matches. So now I have two web server certificates. One is for mdm.local, and the other is for the default. I'm going to delete the default. And then the other one is, of course, the MDM push certificate. So I'm going to add that now. Don't look at my private key.
I memorized it.
Oh, darn it. I'll have to revoke that. Here's the public key. So there we go. So now we have a push certificate installed into Commandment. So this is the topic that I'll mention a little bit later. The topic is important to MDM. So note of the push certificate topic. Okay, so because I changed a bunch of certificates, and it's kind of a chicken and egg, the development web server runs with a certificate, but I just updated the certificate. So I have to restart the server. Hopefully it will restart for me. Good. So since I have a different web certificate, Chrome is prompting me to trust that, which is good. So now if I go and inspect the certificate, the host name should match, even though it's a self-signed, so it's still showing up red. So MDMCL, MDM-LCL, they match. Great. So at this point, it's kind of set up for MDM duties. So there's no devices yet, but in that default page, I can go enroll a device now. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to set up the configuration. So this is just the MDM config for various settings and things. I'm going to call this dep demo. Yay. This is important. The URL for where your server exists needs to be specified because lots of URLs are generated from this command, like app install manifests and check-in URLs and profile enrollment URLs. So you want to make sure that's accurate. All rights, there's a whole bunch of rights you can assign and not assign, but Commandment just makes it easy on itself for the moment and assigns all the rights. We're going to use that CA, which is the default CA, and we're going to use this topic, which is the push certificate topic. Of note, the topic must stay the same for the life of an enrolled device if that topic cannot change. So the environment you might be thinking is, okay, I'm using one MDM product. I want to switch out from underneath to another one. Make sure you're using the same push cert, because if you're not, those devices won't talk to it. Apple's very explicit about this in their spec. So that MDM push cert topic must stay the same for the life of the enrolled device. You can, of course, re-enroll all your devices, but who wants to do that? Okay, so add that configuration. It saves it. I can no longer modify those fields. That's great. And this 500 error is actually no MDM configuration present, cannot generate enrollment profile. I just made the configuration. So if I refresh, you probably saw the enrollment profile, or I can just download again. So here's an enrollment profile. This is what it looks like when you install an OS 10. Again, this is all review. You've probably seen this before. Install the MDM enrollment profile. Sorry, I know I'm going kind of fast here. So now this device has enrolled into the MDM server, and you can see things going by here. So if we go back to our devices, so send a device. Oh, something happened. Live demo. Always happens. Let's try that again. Oh, can't even remove it. Okay. That's fun. That's fine.
It's stuck in there good.
Yeah. Best laid plans, I suppose.
From the two mobile configs that are down there, are they unique or are they redundant? Yeah,
so each time, at least for Commandment, they are unique. Every time you download one, it is unique. I'm actually going to very quickly restart this. There we go.
Turning it on.
Sorry, this will be pretty quick. Rehearse this and everything. Yeah, okay. Yes, got some validation. Okay. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, can't remove it. All right. Well, let's hope the DEP enrollment works. Okay, so we're back here. All right. No devices. If I could remove that configuration profile, I would just retry the enrollment, but go figure, it's not working. That's a fun one. Anyone ever seen an OS 10 profile that you can't remove? Have to investigate that later. Okay, so moving on. So once you have your cert set up, you would, right, so we have our MDM configuration. Oh, that's probably why. EA2. Add configuration, we have our topic.
Do sudo profile/d.
Like that?
Lowercase. Oh, delete. Yeah, capital D. Yeah. Capital D. Here we go.
Oh, look at that, they're gone. So now that we have config and certs, let's try again. A new one. Yeah, something's up. Maybe my MDM client is not a happy camper on this machine. Okay, so moving on to depth then. Assuming that you would have seen device enrolled there. Okay, so groups. Groups are just an abstraction. They're not related to your operating system groups or anything like that. So you just create a name, call this Seattle Dev Demo. So now there's a group, very unexciting. Profiles. So you want to upload profiles. Obviously, MDM is all about profiles. We're going to add 1, 2, 3. Never mind that UI. It's all very lame at the moment. But I'm going to install a couple of example profiles. One of them is my monkey manifest profile, which specifies the location of the monkey server. Another one is Rich Troughton's config profiles for blocking setup assistant and diagnostics, just so one less thing that the user has to be bugged about. And for each of these profiles, I'm going to assign them to the group that we just created. Okay, so I'm just going to double check one. Good, it's in the group. So applications. So to upload an application, it's pretty simple. You just pick your application, and I've already prepared a Monkey Kickstart application here to upload. Again, it needs to be signed. So we've just chosen to sign that with our Apple developer signature. So. Because applications need to be installed in their there's this, I guess you'd call it a hack that tells it to install early. And this is when the first user that's registered in DEP tries lack of ability to install things at the login window in 10.11 or below. So we've put it in the group, we've assigned that, we've got profiles. Now we need to move on to our DEP configuration. So to add your DEP configuration, you need to have your API keys. And the normal way you do this, with Commandment anyway, is you would add a DEP configuration. So there's nothing there. You go to your, you manage this DEP configuration, and you download a signing certificate. Once you do that, then you would go to deploy.apple.com, sign into your account for your DEP enrollment, upload that certificate, and you download your API keys. I've already done that, so I'm just going to provide those API keys here. There we go. So it has the DEP token in there, and it hasn't done the initial sync yet, but I bet it's probably done it now. So if I just refresh, that sync is complete. It's done it in the background. There's a thread running that does that. But we're not quite done yet. So even though it's synced and it's pulled over all the devices that are registered in that DEP, I need to add a DEP profile. DEP profile tells it where to check into with an MDM server. And to do that, there's a whole bunch of settings for these DEP profiles. So this is the thing that I said I was scared if your API keys get lost, someone can just reassign your DEP server willy-nilly. So we'll give it a name. Everything is Seattle Dev Demo. We're going to tell it to await device configuration. So for OS 10, this allows you to create a user account for the OS 10 machine if you want. We're not going to do that here. I just don't have that built out yet. But it allows it to do that, and it can only be done in this await state. So I'm just going to check it just to well, let people know about it, really. And because I don't want users to be bothered with all this stuff, I'm going to disable all of this stuff. Tell the user to skip series, skip diagnostics, skip file vault, skip passcode, skip it all. Just let them use their silly device. So it's added that profile to Commandment, and it should be on its way to being uploaded to Apple. And if I refresh the page again, there, it's already uploaded to Apple. All right, so what I should see if I go over to devices now that it's synced is a new device. And that one actually worked, joy. So this is the DEP device as it came from DEP. And so what I'm going to do is assign that device to the Seattle Dep Demo group, which will associate it with the profiles and the apps. So there we go. So that device is now associated with that. And with that, we've got our profiles, our apps, our dep config, all set up, uploaded, certificates, configuration. I think it's ready to, let's give it a go. Let's see what happens with our live demo here. So the OS is going to boot, and it's going to pull down the DEP configuration that we just created and uploaded to Apple. And it has all the stuff in there, all the stuff to skip, all of the MDM URL, enrollment profile, certificates, all that stuff is in the dep config. And again, pretend this computer was shipped to another person. You're not even looking at it. Shrink wrapped out of the box.
And the,
There we go. And so the profile you uploaded from Trouton, for example, to suppress a lot of the setup, that's after the fact. This is the initial.
This is the very initial.
And then
Yeah,
the
I'll actually
subsequent
show
ones will
you.
get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So this is a OS 10 dep screen. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen it. So it tells you which would you like to do this. I allowed it to be skipped, so that's why there's a skip configuration. You don't have to do that. Oh, of course. And it gets in this loop. That's fun. Let's try again. Thank goodness for snapshots. Going to check one quick thing while that OS boots. Yeah, so while that configuration is going, the dep configuration, those profiles are actually getting installed in the background. And I'll show you that once it boots here. We're getting close, I swear. Boy. That is unfortunate. I wonder if that is... Sorry, folks. Live demo. Bear with me.
with the VMs, is there any?
With VMs for testing like this, is there any caveats to this DP or any other?
Yeah, so not really.
Okay.
In VMware, you can actually override a serial number.
And so you've already done that.
And so I've done that. Yeah. So this guy, then that, in fact, we wouldn't even gotten this far if the DEP serial number wasn't associated. So it's getting that far. It's communicating with Apple. Let me just make sure it is in NAT mode. It's got the correct name server. Get his mask. Let's try this once more. It actually worked here before. Max saw. Yeah, maybe DEP isn't quite working. Do they actually have an MD or a DEP status? They haven't for a while.
Not yet.
I wonder what. Yep, still not working. I don't know what to say. Theoretically. Yep. I'm not sure. So what should have happened is we would have walked through this screen here. And yeah, so we would have walked through the screen and it would have asked for, I think, time zone and time zone, region location. We saw that already. And then that's about it. Then it will ask for a user setup configuration. And in which case you have to create a local account. So that's just the normal OS 10 account creation. And then once that happens, the user logs in as a normal setup assistant user account created would. But immediately after, there would be a monkey install, and it would show up right on the desktop. And in fact, pop right open is what the post install script did in the package. So sorry I can't live demo that for you, but let's see if we can't restart that and get that going. Yes. So the VMnet 8.
All right, so I'm just going to say it out loud what I was asking earlier. Since there's network problems earlier, we were just wondering whether or not the MDM server was rebound to an interface that the VM was able to actually reach.
Right. So by default, Commandment listens to all interfaces, including VMnet 8, which is NAT only, the NAT address of or the NAT network interface of VMware, and so that's listening. One little trick for the host names is I had to, and this is just purely for this demo setup, is had to redirect DNS back with a DNS mask. So that included modifying the DHCP setup for VMware so that it gets handed out properly to the client. I swear this was all rehearsed and worked literally minutes before I got here.
Related question.
You know what? Let's.
So normally when you're or as you've been developing the MDM software, go ahead.
I think I know what's going on. Give me 2 seconds and I'll answer that because it'll take a second just to restore the snapshot. What I did not do, I think, is assign the machine to the dep profile. That kind of helps sometimes. Yay. Okay. So while it reboots, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So as you've been working on this project and figuring out how MDM works and dep works and so on, when you normally don't have a dozen people staring at you and breathing down your neck, and you're trying to figure out how things work, how have you historically, I guess, gone through the process of troubleshooting dep communications problems and so on? What tools are you doing? What techniques are you using most often?
So a ton of it is trial and error. It's like, oh, that didn't work. Try it again. Modify this little thing. Try it again. Try it again. There's no real, and it's actually something that I'd really like to see from Apple is a dep simulator would be fantastic, so that you can submit requests in the way that Apple devices do it to your server to kind of duplicate the functionality there. But unfortunately, there's nothing like that. So you have to read the spec, the MDM spec, which is behind NDA, that enterprise account, and just kind of do your best at doing that. There is a dep simulator for the API that your application manages devices through, but in the way that it talks to an actual device at its initial boot up, there's no simulator for that, which is, of course, the most important part. Hey, much better.
Nice.
I forgot to assign a device. Okay, so you make an account. You hit continue. And fingers crossed, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Really? We got that far?
Wait for it.
Come on. No, it's not good. Well, it's already enrolled, actually. In fact, I can show you that not only is it enrolled, but it installed our, it did not install our profiles. It's for shame. We did associate that device with group, right? Yeah. It did get enrolled. Let's just try that again. Yeah, so the depth spec, yeah, there's it's just a lot of trial and error. That's right. Yep. he asked the only way to get the specification is through the enterprise account. That's true.
So, hey Jesse. So, are you assigning, unassigning to go through that iteration? Because to remove it only goes once.
Yeah, I actually think there. Yeah, I guess there is a removal. So I don't actually remove any devices from any of their previous profiles. You just reassign it to a new one, and it takes. And that's what this does when you you go to dep, or I'm sorry, you go to devices. No, yeah, you go to dep, manage your dep profile, and you assign that device. That is how that goes. So once more for the win. Again, I wish this step weren't necessary, but at least in 10.11 and below, it is required to get the initial app install going. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. No. It's typically right around there. Yeah, something's not quite connecting. So, but what I can do, what I can show you is no, it's not liking that either. I wonder if it's I don't know. I'm going to have to debug that. It feels like it's a certificate issue. Because it enrolled, I should be able to go to. So that's trusted. You'll note Safari didn't bother me about the certificate, so it definitely enrolled the MDM profile. But stuff is not quite installing. It feels like it's not getting. Yeah, it hasn't done the initial check-in. That's bizarre. I don't know what to say. So it's not properly enrolled, like my computer wasn't. So I can't even actually manually send it a device, a command to go ahead and do that, which is very simple. You just app install and it would go. But as you can see, it's failing in the push to device. So the push notification is going screwy for whatever reason. I'm not sure what. Let's delete, re-add. Sorry, we'll cut bait if this is no longer working. Let's just try this once more. I did tell DEP that this user can remove that, but it's getting the same problem. So something's definitely up. I don't know what it is. I'll have to solve it for you guys later. But essentially, what would happen? I'm gonna do a really cheap thing here and just drag that thing in there. if I can. I know, super cheap, but. So what it was supposed to do is this. So it comes out of the user account, pops up Monkey, and is supposed to check in. Maybe I found the root of the problem, actually. We'll blame the Wi-Fi. Yeah. Thanks, Mac.
Darn Wi-Fi.
Okay, so none of that. Launchpad shows a little dialogue, a little progress bar, and then Monkey opens, and that's how it's supposed to work. Clearly, I've got some sort of networking issue going on, so it's not working. Anyway, that's what was supposed to happen. Sorry, I couldn't make it dance for you. What's that? Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's an enrollment problem. Not even getting push notifications sent out for whatever reason. Sure, that's the bulk of it. Wi-Fi issue. Okay, so just a couple more, just two more slides, and then we'll call it done. So what now? Obviously, that demo was just supposed to show Monkey installation. What would you want to do after that? Maybe do a reboot workflow. Part of the motivation of this open source stuff is to get your own management workflow like Monkey or Puppet or whatever you want to use. So you'd have to develop that workflow kind of yourself once you deploy those two tools. Maybe you remove that newly registered account. I'm not sure. So the IBM folks showed this fantastic UI where an end user clicks through and it shows them what things are getting installed and stuff like that. I heard that someone's working on that. I'm not quite sure that we all can use. That would be great. More open source software. Just a couple considerations, dep deployment considerations, machine retirement. What happens when you sell or donate a machine? It's still in your dep enrollment thing. I think it's an open question by Apple or for Apple. I don't think it's really solved yet. I guess you can just kind of let it sit in your dep database with Apple. Apple does have a deprecated disown DEP command where you can just kind of get rid of the device, but it is a deprecated command now. What happens when the internet's down for imaging or DEP services are down, notwithstanding live demos? It basically falls back to the no internet situation, I think. So what happens with the logic board repair, new serial number? Does Apple re-enroll that? I know that's pretty rare these days for you to get a new serial number. Dep devices on not yet enrolled by sellers. So we've seen this where devices show up at a place without having yet been enrolled in DEP. Shame on you, reseller. And just a note, trustworthiness of DEP vendors. I'm sure Apple vets all their people quite well, but what happens if you buy a piece of equipment and it's enrolled in your competitor's dep account on accident? That's fairly unlikely, but I wonder if we'll see stories about accidental vendors doing the wrong thing, resellers. And then just kind of a general note, the bar lowering of MDM, could we see some evil here? Could there be phishing attacks asking people to join malicious MDMs now that there's open source code and stuff like that? And open source code has been available for a while, so I'm not too worried about it, but I just posed the question for the community to talk about.
Verizon.
Was it Verizon? Sorry. There was there was an actual public instance of a cellular provider who did an MDM for configuring the screen on iOS devices to pre-install like the Verizon transfer agent and all sorts of stuff on there, that someone walked out the door and the profile was still on their device.
Oh.
Yeah. And they claimed after the fact that, oh, we just set this up and to help quickly set up customers' phones. But yeah, it's happened already.
Wonderful.
Slack channels, etc. if any of the remote folks want to say anything, please. Yeah. Questions? Good.
What are the appropriate solutions? Microphone.
Yes, it is.
Let me ask it again to the microphone for recording. What are the appropriate Slack channels?
So the general channels are MDM and DEP for those discussions, specifically for Commandment and micro MDM. We've got Commandment and micro MDM on Slack. So go ahead and join that. And DEP and MDM. Yep, I just mentioned those. Yeah.
Keep the light.
Oh, there it goes.
There's a light. It's very technical. Do you have any plans, or do you know if anybody's working on, like, are you planning on expanding this to the other phone operating system? It's mainly Android because really nobody uses Windows Phone.
Yes, MDM. Go ahead. Yeah. So
BlackBerry. Actually, yeah. You baked a Bez into this, right?
You have to have a separate app that does all of your server communication, and then the app itself on the phone tells the phone how to all the management bits and policy bits. So it's kind of so in order to do MDM on Android, you have to develop an Android app. So I don't know of any plans that anyone in the open source community is doing that. There's probably already solutions out there, I bet. Probably open source prepackaged already ready to go. So I don't know of any plans. And I don't know of any Windows plans either. I'm not quite sure what's involved there. You probably know more about that than pointing at Michael in there. Good. Good. I'm going to go try and solve this push notification bug.
Thanks. Microphone. Yeah.
Thanks, remote people. I think we'll cut it off there. Have a good night.